I'm Pat Torres. Welcome to the story. You know, language can be a fickle beast. Depending on your predisposition and maybe your assumptions, you could interpret the meaning of a sentence far differently than somebody else would. And often it's the courts and judges who have really the final say. And that appears to be the destination for Oregon's Measure 113. It's our big story tonight. Today, Oregon's new Secretary of State, Yvonne Griffin-Valade, made her first major ruling. She says that state lawmakers who had 10 or more unexcused absences during this past legislative session will not be allowed to run for re-election in 2024. Now, if you're one of the nearly 1.3 million Oregonians who voted yes on Measure 113, you're probably thinking, well, yeah, that's exactly what I voted for, so good. This covers 10 lawmakers who racked up 10 or more absences. Not all of them, by the way, are up for re-election next year. But 4 of those who are up for re-election said they definitely plan to run again, and a 5th has not yet decided. As you might expect, they're not so thrilled with today's ruling, although it's hard to believe they're surprised. They plan to challenge Measure 113 in court. Let's set the stage for you before diving into the legal language at the center of all of this. Secretary of State Griffin-Valade released this statement today. It is clear that voters intended Measure 113 to disqualify legislators from running for re-election if they had 10 or more unexcused absences in a legislative session. My decision honors the voters' intent by enforcing the measure the way it was commonly understood when Oregonians added it to our state constitution. She went on to say that her decision is consistent with the legal advice she got from the Oregon Department of Justice. So, then, why do Senate Republicans think they stand a chance of overturning this in court? Well, it's the exact language that 113 uses to amend the state constitution. Here's what it says. 10 or more unexcused absences, quote, shall disqualify the member from holding office as a senator or representative for the term following the election after the member's current term is completed. Now, the Republicans who plan to challenge the measure say they read that to mean that even though they've racked up absences in 2023, they can run in 2024, but then would be banned for the next election in 2028. So it's clearly the end of that sentence that they're latching onto to disqualify them, quote, for the term following the election after the member's current term is completed. So there is the conflict. Secretary of State Griffin-Valade says courts have emphasized the text of adopted ballot measures must be interpreted in a way that's consistent with the voters' intent. And she says voters understood Measure 113 to mean that lawmakers who missed 10 or more days of the session would be banned from holding office during the immediate next term. She supports that thought with direct quotes from the ballot title itself and the explanatory statement for 113. It may seem like we're beating this to death, but it is important. The ballot title says 113 disqualifies those legislators from holding, quote, next term of office, and that yes vote disqualifies legislators from holding the, quote, term following current term of office. And in the voters pamphlet, it says 113 disqualifies voters, quote, from holding term of office after the legislator's current term ends. She even cited news reports that hammered home the same point. Her statement today ended with this. The secretary found no suggestion prior to enactment in the voters' pamphlet, media or otherwise, that the measure was understood or intended to allow absent legislators to serve an additional term after accumulating too many absences and then be disqualified the term after that. So, she's made her position clear on this to the chagrin of Senate Republicans. Here's part of the statement from Minority Leader Tim Knopp this afternoon. It appears the Democratic Attorney General and the Democrat Secretary of State are willing to cover for the Democrat Senate President Rob Wagner's decision to ensure Measure 113 quashes the free speech of minority Senate Republicans as it was designed to do by political special interests. He went on. We believe the plain language of Measure 113 allows for members to run again in 2024 elections. We disagree with the Secretary of State's determination and will challenge it in court. Okay, here's my opinion on this. And before we really get going, it's probably worth reminding you, I'm not for the Democrats, I'm not for the Republicans, I'm not for anybody. I'm just an independent journalist who's calling the balls and strikes as I see them. Here we go. Republicans knew exactly what the message was from voters when Measure 113 passed. It was loud and clear. Quit hijacking Oregon's legislature with your boycotts or pay a steep price. Arguing anything else is nonsense. Now, I guess Republicans can say that's not fair and the Democratic voters ganged up on them to deprive them of the right to represent the people in their district. I mean, I don't think that was the motivation for most voters, but even if it was, it does not change the facts. The measure clearly says if you miss 10 sessions without permission, you are out of office as soon as your term is over, period. And by the way, with most of the politicians impacted, it's not like a Democrat's going to win their seat. They will simply be replaced by another Republican, probably another conservative Republican. So I think they should quit whining about it and looking for some loophole to overturn it and accept the consequences. Then at least you could argue that your boycott, your sacrifice was noble because it was for an important cause, and look at how much it cost you. Republicans like to consider themselves the party of law and order. But it's hard to see the Republican response tonight as anything other than, let's see if we can bend this law to our version of order. I, for one, am not buying it. The voters spoke loud and clear. You made your choices. It's time to live with the consequences. That's my opinion anyway. You don't have to agree with me. But what do you think? Let us know how you feel. Email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Now let's get to some of your thoughts on a story we brought you yesterday concerning the city of Portland. We shared the results of a city survey that asked residents for their input on how they view the Rose City and what its biggest issues are. The top 3 issues should be no surprise to you. 1, homelessness, and then the cost of living and community safety. Homelessness overwhelmingly takes the top spot. More than 44% of the people surveyed said that was their top concern. 21% said cost of living, 19% said safety. This, by the way, was a random survey sent to 20,000 households throughout the city with additional targeted outreach to traditionally underrepresented groups as well. They got about 5,300 completed surveys back. Here are some of your emails to us last night. Emma wrote, I think the homeless issue and all the people dying due to drugs are my 2 main issues. Barbara emailed us to say, the homelessness, mentally ill, drug addicts, trash, crime, and total neglect make Portland very unattractive. Several of you blame the city's issues on local government. Matt wrote in to say, of all the problems we have, to me, the most serious is an ineffective and often ambivalent city and county government that is seemingly grasping at straws to find the answers. They prove again and again that they have no clue. And how about this voicemail from Jeff?
I went to San Francisco a few weeks ago, traveled extensively throughout the city, kind of took mental notes. San Francisco has its problems, no doubt, with homelessness, graffiti, and trash, but it's much, much more cleaner than Portland and seems to have less visible problems than Portland. What's wrong with the city? Leadership, leadership, leadership.
We also heard from several of you who have moved out of Portland or even Multnomah County, a concerning trend for the state's biggest city. Steve told us we had to leave Portland, Multnomah County, and Oregon for Missouri. I was born and raised in Oregon, 54 of 59 years. We left because of the results of the survey and the city government that has enabled, encouraged, and emboldened the lawless behavior. A viewer named Carolyn told us that she lived in North Portland for 7 years and dealt with all kinds of issues, like people sitting on her porch, bathing with her hose, stealing packages, and even her outdoor Christmas decorations. She added, in 2021, I decided to sell and move, and one of my top must-haves I told my realtor was, get me out of Multnomah County. The high cost of living along with safety concerns drove me out. I'm now happy in Clackamas County in a safe, quiet neighborhood. Not a single package has been stolen, no one showers at my faucet, and I still have all my Christmas decorations. I have no regrets in leaving.
My wife and I just moved away from Portland in January, and we had spent years trying to get to Portland, and we finally did, and we lived there for 3.5 years. I was attacked, had to fight off a crazy man. The only reason I was able to survive that one is because I was packing a sidearm, which I only started doing after the summer of riots. I don't buy this. I don't buy the responses from Portland residents, and I'll tell you why. It's because during the 129th straight of rioting, there were plenty of people there to support that. I never in my life thought I would see something like that. I never thought I would see a city not fight back against that. But Portland was all about it, and I think it's because people are just so in love with the sound of their own voices and being stuck in an echo chamber. My God, the mayor was voted back into office during one of his most abysmal failures. And so I'll wrap it up with that and say, I don't buy it, Portland. I don't buy it. Best of luck to you. I'm glad that I'm watching this show in my rear view.
All right, thank you, Daniel. No echo chamber here. We take opinions from all sides, as you just heard. Up next on the story, the Fed started enforcing new efficiency standards for light bulbs last week, making incandescent bulbs mostly obsolete. But upgrading to LEDs can be expensive up front, especially for small businesses. Environmental reporter Cale Williams joins us after the break to tell us about a program that offers up those upgrades for free. That's when the story returns. The age of incandescent light bulbs, the ones that many of us grew up with, is effectively over after the Department of Energy started enforcing new efficiency standards last week. And that means almost every light bulb you'll buy from now on will be LED. They shine brighter and they use less energy. But upgrading lighting can be expensive, especially if you're a small business. But there is help. Environmental reporter Cale Williams talked to one business owner who was able to upgrade without paying a dime.
Flip the light switch at 346 Grit CrossFit in Gresham, and you'll see 5,000 square feet of workout space, all exceptionally well lit by rows of LED lights. But that wasn't always the case. Up until about a year ago, owner Randy Lauer was using fluorescent lights, which came with a bunch of problems.
I mean, there was dark corners everywhere, and the flickering was terrible, and it just felt like you were in a conference room for hours.
So around 2020, he began looking to upgrade. He knew LEDs were the way to go, but he wasn't prepared for how much it would cost.
And it was a hefty price tag.
How hefty? $34,000. And with the pandemic cutting his business revenue by as much as 70%, Lauer said it just wasn't in the budget.
We got the expensive quote and we just sat on it because we couldn't afford it at the time.
But then he found out about a program from the Energy Trust of Oregon, which helps small business owners upgrade their lighting at no cost. He filled out an application, and when he got the email saying he'd been approved, he almost didn't believe it.
And it said no cost. And then I wrote back twice, no cost means no cost. And they're like, absolutely no cost. And I'm like, let's sign up, let's do it.
We can get them connected with an energy advisor.
Cameron Starr, with Energy Trust, said there are a few requirements businesses need to meet. They need to be customers of either Pacific Power or Portland General Electric, and
So we're looking at businesses that operate in 20,000 square feet or less, and or have 20 employees or less.
as long as businesses check those boxes, they're eligible. And Starr said the benefits, they're almost immediate.
So upgrading to LED lighting can save a business up to 75%, or they'll use about 75% less energy than their standard lighting.
It was amazing.
Lauer's already seeing savings of roughly $100 a month on his power bill. But better than that, he's seeing happier customers.
When it was done and completed, everybody that came in that next day said that they were amazed and shocked about how the lighting looked when they came back, and they didn't even realize how bad it was before.
So if you've got a small business that's in need of a lighting upgrade, we've got links to this program up right now at kgw.com.
Cale joins me now. Super interesting story, but okay, no free lunch. Who's paying for this?
Well, you and I are, Pat.
Great.
The Energy Trust of Oregon was founded in 2002, and it's a nonprofit, and it gets its funding from 5 different local utilities, and they get their funding
From us.
From us.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
And has this always been a good idea to get rid of these incandescent bulbs? I could just hear people saying, hey, leave my light bulbs alone.
They very much were saying that back in 2008, 2009, all the way up to 2012. There was big pushback against these bulbs, and that a lot of that came from the fact that they were more expensive than traditional light bulbs. But over time, as the technology's gotten better, the scale of economy has ramped up, they've really come down in cost so that they're not really that much more expensive than normal bulbs, and they last 25 to 50 times longer. The guy I was talking to from Energy Trust had a light bulb on his desk that he said he bought 15 years ago. So you can essentially buy a light bulb and then never think about buying a light bulb again.
Wow. Okay, but I've got some light bulbs in my bathroom that have already burned out. They're those fancy ones.
Well,
I'm just saying.
He did tell me that it depends on your use.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know what you're up to in your bathroom. You've got those bright spotlights shining down on you, but
no spotlights, but a lot of use, I guess. All right. Thank you, Cale. More than you ever want to know. Thanks for that great story. And let me just say, there's 4 of us using the one bathroom in the house, which drives my wife crazy. And speaking of my wife, I could use some help from you folks out there. My wife is brilliant and powerful and all-knowing, but she has this one weird thing where she thinks that if you're going to be back in a room anytime in the next 20 or 30 minutes, it's really more energy efficient to just leave the light on. So she goes around the house leaving lights on. I go around the house turning them off, and it's crazy. So I want to know from you, who's right, me or my wife? It's okay if you say my wife. She's usually right. That's what's going on in the Torres house. Coming up next on The Story, we're taking a live look at the mighty Pacific Ocean in the distance from our Newport camera. You might have heard about the warm ocean temperatures across the country in the Atlantic, but we've got a marine heat wave ourselves. Meteorologist Joe Ranieri explains how it could affect our coast and wildlife when The Story returns. The KGW School Supply Drive is going on right now, and there are so many ways to give. You can drop off supplies at any On Point branch, Dick's Auto Group location, or one of many community partners like Ant Farm Youth Services in Sandy. Some of the most needed school supplies are pencils, lined paper, crayons, and markers. We want to thank On Point Community Credit Union, Safeway, Pacific Power, and Dick's Auto Group for everything they're doing to make this year's supply drive a great success. All right, let's take a live look out from our Chinook Winds Skycam in Lincoln City, showing the beach tonight. It looks gorgeous out there. If you've been paying attention to the national news lately, you've heard about the brutal heat that much of the country has been dealing with this summer. We've been mostly spared in our neck of the woods, but instead we're seeing some extreme warming to our west out in the Pacific. Meteorologist Joe Ranieri is here to explain what's going on and what the potential impacts are to the coast. Joe?
Well, Patrick, when we talk about heat waves, you typically think about the air temperature, right? Well, there are marine heat waves, and we've been experiencing that here the last couple of months or so. So that's when basically a marine heat wave is when temperatures are well above average for 5 days or longer, and we've definitely gone past that 5 days. So ocean temperatures out in the Pacific and really out in the Atlantic and throughout the Gulf of Mexico are running much warmer from where they should be on average. Out in the Pacific Ocean, 5 degrees warmer than normal. If you're thinking, well, that's not that much. Well, some locations are a little bit warmer than that. It does make a big difference when you're looking at temperatures closer to 70 degrees instead of maybe 63, 65 degrees. So what does this lead to? Well, it leads to algae blooms, and those can be very dangerous for sea life. And speaking of the sea life, the warm temperatures kind of changes up their migration patterns out in the oceans as well. So as we look at the current conditions out in the Pacific, this is showing out in Astoria. Take a look at the ocean temperature near Astoria and Cannon Beach, close to 70 degrees. In fact, at one point this afternoon, the water temperature was close to 70 degrees. Now, we typically see our temperatures out in the Pacific warm up this time of year, but not quite that warm and not quite this time of August. Usually by the later part of August, early part of September. You travel south a little bit along Highway 101 near Newport, the ocean temperatures are a little bit cooler at 62 degrees. But as we look at the sea surface temperatures across the U.S., you can see out in the Gulf of Mexico, water temperatures, believe it or not, are running anywhere from 95 to close to 100 degrees. And that is the case out off the coast of Florida. And speaking of the coast of Florida, you might remember this. This was earlier this summer where volunteers were kind of moving coral around to deeper parts of the ocean. That's because the coral is bleaching. That obviously is not a good thing. That means the coral is dying because of the warm temperatures. Again, it's not uncommon to see temperatures close to 100 degrees out in the Atlantic Ocean, Gulf of Mexico by the later part of the summer. This was happening almost a month ago. So as we take a look at the West Coast in terms of sea surface temperatures, yeah, we're running on the warm side, to say the least. This is what we're looking at down in parts of Southern California. Anywhere from about 65 to maybe 75 degrees. It's typically going to be warm on that side of the Pacific, right? Well, as we zoom in along the central Oregon coast, Newport, you're looking at some cool conditions compared to parts of Astoria and Tillamook, with ocean temperatures anywhere from 62 to 65 degrees. But we go up north a little bit, even along the Washington coastline, we're seeing warm conditions. And you go well out there in the Pacific, temperatures are in the upper 60s to the low 70s. And as we look at the weather pattern over the next couple of weeks, we're still going to be seeing more of a warmer weather pattern. And that means warmer weather out in the Pacific Ocean. That's just going to lead to warmer temperatures. Again, I'm tracking a heat wave that kicks in this weekend, basically from Saturday all the way into the middle part of next week, Pat. We're going to be looking at temperatures anywhere from 90, 95, maybe 97 degrees. A few models are suggesting close to 100 degrees by the middle part of next week. And if you're wondering, well, these temperatures got to cool off eventually, and that will be the case, but it's not going to happen until at least the early part, maybe in the middle part of September, looking at some of these long-range models.
Wow. I'm so glad you pointed out the water temperatures there, because I just think of the Pacific as freezing all the time, but that's really warm.
That's not the case this summer.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Joe. And before we go tonight, a reminder that you can watch segments from The Story at any time on our streaming app, KGW+. You can also find it on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. Just search for KGW and add the app to your home screen. The full episode of our show replays each night at 8:30, 9:30, and 10:30. So if you miss us live on your 6:30 time slot, don't worry about it. You have several chances to find a time that works for you. And if none of those times work, well, you can find the full episodes at KGW on the KGW YouTube channel. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends, my friends. Stick around now for the good stuff coming your way next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow at 6:30.